everyone, I'm Erin Carswell, Foran's VP Exploration, and as always, I'm thrilled to be here to start talking you through some of the results coming out of our winter 2025 infill program, mostly focused on the Tesla zone and the bridge zones, but also with a surprise coming out of the Mcllvenna Bay deposit as well, which is where we're going to start today. Now, I'll start as usual at the larger scale here, looking at the Flin Flon Greenstone Belt, all the way from the Lalor Snow Lake camp in the far east in Manitoba to the central kind of Flin Flon mining camp and district there, and across into the Saskatchewan side where Foran has the western end of the Flin Flon Greenstone Belt. And this is where we have 140,000 hectares of high prospectivity claims, along with our flagship Mcllvenna Bay deposit, which is currently in the construction phase, and our two new or relatively new discoveries, Tesla and Bridge zones, which are directly adjacent to that deposit. We'll zoom in to have a look at these specifically. Firstly, I have to apologise that the aerial photography here is about 1.5 years old, and it absolutely does not reflect all the construction activity that's been going on here in the past year and a bit. You can't see the mill here, you can't see the cladding going up, all the exciting stuff that's been going on site. So bear that in mind. However, the real point of showing this is, of course, the outline of the mineralisation. You can see Mcllvenna Bay there in the red, Tesla in the yellow, and Bridge Zone sitting in between them in the orange. And now that outline of the Bridge Zone is reflective of the first real lens we've been able to put around this mineralisation, which I'll show you underground for the first time today. It's all starting to come together in terms of geometry, which is very exciting. Now we'll dip underground, and what we're looking at here is the black traces that you can see is all the drilling up until the end of 2024. So it's basically where we started off with the 2025 program. What you can see, I'm going to highlight it here in the red, is Mcllvenna Bay, of course, with the higher drill density here. We do have a resource around this. We have a 29 million tonne reserve that's going to be fed into the Mcllvenna Bay mine plan. However, for the Bridge Zone and the Tesla zones, you can see the drilling density isn't quite there yet, and that's what we're focusing on this winter. We need as much information as we can in order to not only bring it into a resource stage, but start planning how we're thinking about infrastructure. You know, how are we eventually going to get to Tesla? What is our phase 2 going to look like when we start to hopefully bring this kind of mineralisation online? So I'll just quickly point out Bridge here in the middle, and Tesla, of course, is this larger zone developing down plunge of Mcllvenna Bay here. Now, this is basically looking at how the lenses are starting to come together for Tesla and Bridge. On the right-hand side, you can see the resource shells from Mcllvenna Bay, Bridge sitting in the middle, and then, of course, the extra complexity there of the Tesla zone. And we'll talk about some of the upside that comes along with that. But we will first start, and hopefully you can see this purple drill trace coming through the Bridge zone and heading down to the bottom of Mcllvenna Bay there. In fact, I'll circle it. That's this guy here. And this is hole BZ2501. It was part of a press release we put out last month, but it is worth showing you here in 3D because this is an extremely significant hole for Mcllvenna Bay upside. We did initially target it as a hole to make an intersection into the Bridge zone here, and we decided to deepen the hole and test what Mcllvenna Bay might look like down plunge of the existing resource shells. And I will point out the limit of previous drilling at Mcllvenna Bay ran through about here. And what we've done is make a really nice thick intersection of Mcllvenna Bay mineralisation, about 200 metres down plunge of that drilling. So really cool in terms of verification that Mcllvenna Bay continues down plunge. We'll just have a very quick look at the assays here. They were released in that previous release last month that I mentioned. But the Mcllvenna Bay intersection that you can see sitting there at the end of the resource shells was pretty significant in a couple of ways. And firstly, because of the copper-rich nature of the massive sulfide. There was 7.7 metres of massive sulfide there running about 2.23% copper along with 1.7-ish% zinc. And under that, we had a nice thick copper stockwork zone, almost 33 metres, running at almost 1% copper with a bit of zinc, nearly 0.5 gram gold, and a bit of silver as well. So in terms of Mc Bay mineralisation, this is a really nice example. It's a nice thick example. And what it tells us is that Mc Bay is not necessarily pinching out at depth, right? There's a very good chance, we think now, that it will keep going. Now, looking more at the bridge lens, and what you can see in the black traces here is previous intersections made into the bridge and how you can see this somewhat shaping up. What we're planning to do this winter, and some of these holes have already been drilled, we're just waiting on assays, is plug the gaps. So these yellow hole traces that you can see coming through are going to give us a better distribution of drilling into that bridge zone lens, and hopefully we might eventually be able to also bring this into a maiden resource estimate in the near future. And then once again, stepping back to the big scale, and I've added the Coziol fault here in red, because what's increasingly apparent is that Mcllvenna Bay seems to be bound beneath the Coziol fault. I'll grab red here and show you what could be happening. We think that the resource shells probably continue in this orientation along the underside of the Coziol fault. We don't know how far for, that's upside for another day. But we no longer think that these layers fold around into the bridge zone and continue on at Tesla. We think, you know, they were probably once part of the same system, but there's been faulting that has now offset them and has kind of wedged the bridge zone between. So that's a really interesting geometric development as well as an upside kind of a story too. But what we're really here to talk about today is Tesla, of course. And you can see here the Tesla lenses up this end. You can see the previous drilling where we'd gotten to at the end of last year. We already had a relatively good idea of what these lenses looked like. We just needed to go back and fill in some of the gaps. And this is really giving you a better picture of where those gaps were. So what this is showing is the pre-existing drilling into Tesla with about a 50-metre radius around each pierce point. And plotting this up shows you some of these areas that we really want to go into, plug a few holes into, make sure the mineralization is holding together well and really confirm that continuity. And so to do that, we planned these yellow hole traces. This is the drill plan for the winter program this year. You can see that we're doing things a little bit differently this year as well. Normally we would be drilling big parent holes from the frozen lake and then, you know, wedging off at quite a high elevation and drilling 1 or 2 wedges from each parent. What we're doing now is drilling much longer parent holes that come down almost to the lens itself, and then they branch into multiple, we still call them wedges, but it's using a different directional drilling technique that gives us a lot more accuracy and a lot more control over what these wedges look like. So it saves a lot of meters. You can imagine from each parent hole, we're now getting 3 or 4 intersections instead of 1 or 2. So it's more intersections per winter. So a much more efficient way of actually drilling out Tesla. Now, I will quickly highlight the area that we're going to be looking at in detail today, which is this area in here. Not far from pre-existing hole TS2310, which was one of our best copper intersections ever, incidentally. So the hole that we've received the assays back for first from Tesla was an absolutely epic hole called TS2537. And you can already start to see the thickness of the mineralization shine in just this image alone. This was an extraordinary hole. Mineralization occurred over about 143 meters, which we've broken up into 3 distinct composites here, depending on mineralization style and grades, but a huge, huge intersection, the biggest one we've drilled to date. You can see here that the assays, they start off in the upper parts at 37.5 meters, grading almost 0.5% copper and 7.76% zinc, along with a little bit of gold and a little bit of silver. We then go down into what we would call the copper 2 lens or the stockwork lens, which is running at about 22.3 meters at almost 1% copper. And then the big one is the lower intersection. And this is 52.6 meters, running 1.75% copper, 2% zinc, nearly 1 gram gold and 22 grams silver. So this is pretty significant. This is meant to be an infill program, and yet this is the best hole we've ever drilled. And it really is starting to show how Tesla can still surprise us with the thickness of some of these lenses. And bear in mind, you know, the average lens thickness from Mcllvenna Bay together is 15 meters, right? And here we're looking at mineralization spread over a 143 metre interval with really no impact to grade. There's some really good grades in there as well. It's also showing us really how the lenses are starting to stack up. Now I'm going to spin around and use different colours here to show you. This is looking down dip of Tesla from above. Starting here with the copper lens 1, which is not always present at Tesla, but you do see it particularly throughout the central zone. Stepping down into the main lens, and this is the one that just about every hole hits, the most consistent zinc-rich mineralization. Heading down then into copper lens 2, and this is what would be called the copper stockwork zone at Mcllvenna Bay, and finally getting into what we call the mid lenses. Now these lenses have been intersected by a handful of holes now, including TS2310, 14 wedge 2 a couple of years ago as well. They're really interesting breccia zones. They are hosted in a different lithology. They have extraordinary grades, and it really is highlighting that this particular part of Tesla is more complex. There's more going on there. It's potentially a conduit for these metals coming into the system, and we have a fair bit more work to do here to figure out the exact geometries, and we're really excited about it. Even more so because the next down dip wedge that we drilled underneath hole 37 also hit a nice thick intersection of mineralization. We don't have the assays back yet, but the TrueScan data and visual logging confirms around about an 80-metre intersection there that you can see in red. So we really look forward to bringing you the detailed assays for that zone as well. And together, they've helped us really start thinking about what might be going on here. And you can see this cross section that we've put together here. I'm going to actually grab my pen and highlight TS2537, so you can see it coming down through the three main lenses that I indicated before, and then down into this big breccia zone beneath, which have also been intersected by another couple of holes. And then 37 wedge 1 also confirming the thickness of some of those lenses down dip. So again, lots of upside to be had here. The centre of gravity of Tesla is certainly going to be in this vicinity from what we've seen so far. And also it's turning into one of the more complex parts of the ore body too. And you can even see here, I'll start to use the blue here to highlight. It's also where these lower lenses start to kind of kick off, and that's hole 37 there that you can see. So certainly an area that needs a little bit, probably tighter drill density to understand, but one that we think is going to be able to add significantly to the volumes that we're going to be seeing coming out of Tesla. Now, finally, I just wanted to show you this view from underground as well. Again, the yellow traces are what we're planning for the winter program. And you can see there the types of densities that we're aiming for. We're going to be getting up there closer to the drill densities at Mcllvenna Bay. So really excited about where that's going to take us in terms of how we think about Tesla's future development. So anyway, that's about it from me today. We have a lot more holes and intersections coming. We've got a lot more results to come out of this winter program. Please wish us luck for those, and I'll look forward to presenting them to you next time.